As of the 8 a.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center, sustained winds of 155 miles an hour. That does make it a Category 4 hurricane, but a very strong Category 4 hurricane. You only need sustained winds of 157 to make it a Cat 5. So you can see how strong of a hurricane it is. And although it will drop in wind speed some before approaching and making landfall, it's still going to likely be a Category 4 hurricane at landfall with sustained winds of 130 miles an hour. And that cone shows you it's right near the Tampa Bay area, perhaps a little south near Sarasota. You can have landfall anywhere within the cone, so it could extend from the north side of Tampa all the way down to Port Charlotte, but the center of that cone still near the Tampa Bay area. And from there, it will cross over the state of Florida and maintain hurricane status as a Category 1 hurricane before it exits out into the Atlantic Ocean. So the National Hurricane Center, the timing that they give us, landfall around 2 a.m. Thursday morning on the Gulf Coast of Florida. Models have been actually all over the place, and when it comes to the exact timing of the landfall, some of them are earlier, some of them say Wednesday night, others say later Thursday morning, later than 2 a.m., closer to say 4 a.m. So models still really actually not agreeing on the timing of the landfall, but that's what the National Hurricane Center is going with right now, a 2 a.m. landfall, the Tampa Bay area, crossing the state and exiting into the Atlantic Ocean by 2 p.m. on Thursday with sustained winds of 80 miles an hour. Here's a look at the spaghetti models, and they have finally started to come together a bit more. And again, you can see looking like landfall closer to the Sarasota area or the south of Tampa, but still some models bring it into Tampa Bay too, but finally starting to get some agreement there with the models closer to the Bradenton, Sarasota area for that landfall. There's a look at the satellite image. So you can see how we had the eye and how it closed. So you see Milton there with that eye wall. That was a Category 5 hurricane. And now that the eye has closed, it may be going through an eye wall replacement cycle, but it's just showing that it's weakening. However, again, not fast enough. It's still a very strong Category 4 hurricane right now, and it's expanding in size, unfortunately, as it continues to have those winds drop some. The size of it is expanding. So you can see all of that heavy rain pushing into portions of the west coast of Florida, up through the central part of Florida too. And then right above it, there's that line of rain you can see moving from east to west, right across portions of the first coast. That's associated with that frontal boundary. But right below it, that's where we have all of that rain, the heavier rain, some lightning out there too that we are watching with Milton. Just a quick check on our buoy data out in the Gulf of Mexico. Look at that, near Key West, 10 feet. That's being clocked for your wave heights. We also have some rough waves out off the coast of the first coast, 8, 7, 6 feet when it comes to those wave heights too. So we'll keep an eye on our buoys as Milton approaches landfall. Tropical alerts. A hurricane warning is in place for places like Tampa and Orlando, all of that area in red. And then there's a tropical storm warning in effect for all of the areas in orange. So for us here locally, for the first coast, Putnam, St. Johns, and Flagler counties under a hurricane warning, but also the beaches of Duval and Nassau County under a hurricane warning. Then the rest of those counties, plus our inland northeast Florida counties under the tropical storm warning. And there's a tropical storm warning for coastal areas of Glynn and Camden counties. And then the yellow, that's a tropical storm watch. So it means tropical storm conditions are possible. And then for storm surge, we have a storm surge warning in effect for our coastal areas. So of course, the worst of the storm surge going to be where that landfall is, near the Tampa Bay area, near Sarasota, down towards Fort Myers, 10 to 15 feet of surge. Catastrophic. 8 to 12 feet possible, again, near the Fort Myers area. They don't need any more surge either, of course, after Ian too. So that's where the worst of the surge is expected to be. But still, for areas of the first coast, we could have along coastal areas, storm surge of 3 to 5 feet. And then for the St. Johns River, storm surge of 2 to 4 feet possible. So where does that compare with past hurricanes? Well, We know we had devastating storm surge for Riverside, San Marco, downtown, Doctors Inlet during Irma. And for this hurricane, Milton, the forecast is to not be as much surge. Same story when we compare it to Matthew's storm surge for St. Johns County. You can see Matthew had 5 to 8 feet of surge, and we're expecting 3 to 5 feet. That's the forecast for Milton. But still, that is surge, that is dangerous. Be aware, especially during times of high tide. So a quick look at some of our areas when high tide could hit on Thursday. There's one early in the morning, really overnight, Wednesday night to Thursday morning, and then another one Thursday afternoon. It's anywhere from Jacksonville Beach around 1:41 a.m. and then again at 2:18 p.m. to downtown. The Main Street Bridge is at 3:03 a.m. and in the afternoon 3:21 p.m. And then for Palatka, it's 8:27 a.m. and then 9:05 p.m. Again, 2 of those high tides on Thursday that we'll have to watch. What makes it even worse is if that surge is combined with rainfall, then you really have water collecting fast and building up. Rainfall totals are going to be the worst the farther south and east you go for the first coast. So for places like near St. Augustine, down towards Palatka and points south, you could have max 12 inches of rain. St. Augustine specifically, we're thinking closer to 10 inches of rain. You could have up to 8 inches of rain for places like Ponte Vedra, Green Cove Springs, and then along the coastal areas of southeast Georgia through portions of Duval and Nassau, you could have up to 4 inches of rain. For those of you close or further inland, really, we're only expecting about 1 inch of rain. But as mentioned, you get the most amount of rain down towards the southeast for places like St. Augustine to Palatka to Palm Coast. And the bad news is we are already receiving rainfall there, heavy rain moving into those portions of our coverage area, which means it's just going to exacerbate things. When it comes to wind, we could have sustained winds of 40 all up and down the coast, and that's when bridges close, so we'll keep a close eye on that. Now you could have sustained winds of 60 miles an hour for places like southern St. John's and Putnam and Flagler, and that's when you're going to have widespread tree damage and power outages. Now gusts of 60 miles an hour can also take down trees and cause power outages, and we won't rule out gusts to 60 miles an hour for places like the Jacksonville metro area. And speaking of that wind, let's take a bigger look all across the state of Florida. Maybe a lot of you have loved ones on the Gulf Coast of Florida. So what are they expecting for winds? It looks like we're going to get the most destructive winds. Well, of course, where landfall is, where the center of that hurricane is, and that could be near the Sarasota or Tampa Bay area. And then look how big the wind field gets at landfall. Remember how we talked about how this hurricane is growing in size? So when this makes landfall overnight tonight, you could already have tropical storm force winds extending over most of the peninsula of Florida. And of course, then that will only continue as this hurricane makes its trek across the state. So through Thursday morning, notice places like the First Coast included in those tropical storm force winds. The worst of the winds near and potentially south of Orlando, but really following along I-4, and it continues all the way down towards places like Fort Myers too. And then it will cross out into the Atlantic, but you just saw how big that wind field is. Most of the peninsula getting some sort of wind out of this hurricane. The arrival time for tropical storm force winds, so we'll say around 40 miles an hour, it could arrive as early as Wednesday afternoon for the Tampa Bay area. And then for the First Coast, it looks more like Thursday. We're going to get some of those winds in the morning. So Thursday, 2 a.m., we'll start to see more of those tropical storm force winds arrive. But still, with the way that the timing of this hurricane, we're trying to figure out exactly when it will make landfall. We're going to say for the First Coast, all across the First Coast, the worst hours will be from midnight tonight until 12 p.m. Thursday. We could get some of those really strong winds starting around 12 a.m. and then continuing all the way until lunchtime Thursday. But let's just go county by county now. I'm sure we have a lot of comments saying, what about my town? What about my town? Please watch this, look for your county, because if we mention your county, this is your answer. This is what we are expecting for that. So if you live in Putnam or Flagler counties, we're expecting sustained winds of 60 miles an hour and gusts up to 75 miles an hour, rain of 6 to 12 inches, and a surge of 2 to 4 feet. Be aware of flooding along the St. Johns River. Stay indoors with that wind. Unless you're at risk of surge, then of course you have to get out. But if you're away from the surge, stay inside. A mobile home is not safe in these types of winds. So please make other arrangements. Go to a shelter, go to a friend's house or family member's house. Now for St. John's, a surge of 3 to 5 feet, winds of 55 miles an hour, sustained gusts of 75. So we are expecting more trees down, power outages likely widespread, and rainfall of 5 to 10 inches as well. We could get some flooding into homes and into businesses, and that's why there have been some mandatory evacuations for portions of St. John's. For Duval and Clay, surge of 2 to 4 feet, winds sustained at 40 but gusts to 60, so we won't rule out the possibility of power outages with that, and rainfall of 4 to 8 inches. And then if we move up the coast, places like Nassau, Camden, Glen, surge of 1 to 4 feet, winds of 35, gusts up to 50, and a rainfall total between 2 and 4 inches of rain total. And then if we move inland, Columbia, Baker, Bradford, Union, you're going to see a rainfall totals of 1 to 3 inches of rain and gusts up to around 40 miles an hour. And then for places like Ware, Charlton, Brantley, and Pierce, rainfall totals only about an inch and gusts up to 35 miles an hour. So as mentioned, again, it's going to be the worst starting around midnight until about 12 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. You can see that here. This is a threat map that tries to time out starting up around Wednesday afternoon and goes until Thursday afternoon. It gets worse after midnight. We need some good news, don't we? Well, Friday and Saturday, that's something to look forward to. We're going to be in the 70s in the afternoon, mornings in the 60s, and mostly dry. Do we have any questions? I feel like my voice is about to crack. Excuse me.
You've done a great job. You've answered every question that I've seen in the comment section. I was going to say we have the Flagler County Emergency Press Conference coming up. If you want to maybe talk about Flagler County before we
Absolutely.
We're just going to go from this to Flagler County.
Sure thing. We'll go right back to here. So we do have the meteorologist Robert Speta, who will be giving us live updates throughout the storm as well out of Flagler County. Flagler and Putnam, likely the worst areas to be hit. So the timing is the same, 12 a.m. to 12 p.m. Your impacts, you could have sustained winds of 60 miles an hour, gusts up to 75 miles an hour. And that means that we will have widespread tree damage, unfortunately, some possible damage to some structures, and power outages as well. So right now, today, you need to be charging your devices because the power will go out and you need a way to reach people, to stay connected. Don't forget, you can always stream our coverage if you lose power and you can't use the TV. You can stream it on our app, First Coast News Plus. Also want to give a big shout out to everyone watching on First Coast News Plus and on YouTube. Our YouTube watchers have been amazing. So thank you for following along with us. And don't forget, you can continue to follow along with us if you lose power that way. So that's why you should be charging your devices right now and today. And then also we'll just, besides the winds, you have the threat of surge for Flagler, for all the beaches, Intercoastal Waterway, and then of course over into Putnam and you get into the St. Johns River. So we'll have to watch out for the possibility of surge. And we'll likely get our most amount of rainfall for places like Flagler County as well. Rainfall of 6 to 12 inches possible. So with the rain and with the wind alone, you would want to stay inside. You need to be hunkering down by this afternoon. Don't be out on the roads. Be in the spot that you are going to ride out the storm in, whether that's your home or that's a shelter or someone else's home. Because again, don't forget that mobile homes are not safe. If you are in an area that has storm surge flood and has flooded before, I would likely move. You'd be at the risk of flooding again. And then also if you have any big trees over your house too, just be aware. I'm so nervous about big trees falling onto homes and onto structures as well with winds of this strength of 60 miles an hour and gusts to 75 miles an hour.